Okay.
Okay, first of all, I want to thank everybody for coming tonight. I appreciate you being here. We're going to talk tonight about the oil spill in the Gulf of Mexico. As you probably know, there's been a long history of drilling offshore in the United States. In fact, the first wells were drilled in Grand Lake, St. Mary's, Ohio in 1891. A few years later than that, the first saltwater drills wells were drilled in Santa Barbara Channel in California, and that was in 1896. Ever since then, the U.S. has ventured deeper and deeper into the ocean in search of oil. On April 20th, 2010, the Deepwater Horizon saltwater drilling rig 40 miles southeast of Louisiana coast had an explosion. This explosion was caused by a blowout, and it resulted in a catastrophic fire. 2 days later, the rig sank to the bottom of the ocean, and it was at this time that the oil leak was discovered. First accounts were that there 8,000 barrels of oil were leaking into the Gulf a day. They have since raised that number to 30,000, 50,000, and now 80,000 barrels a day leaking into the Gulf. So that's quite a bit of oil leaking. To understand the scope of what's going on in the Gulf right now, you need to know what has happened to stop the spill, what has happened to clean up the spill, and the efforts and the consequences of the spill. Several efforts to stop the spill have occurred, starting with on April 20th, the day of the explosion. Workers threw a switch to close a blowout preventer. A blowout preventer is a 450-ton valve that's designed to slam closed and keep anything from coming up out of the well. The first try of closing that failed. They do have a backup procedure. They tried the backup procedure and it also failed. So a few days later, they sent down robots to the bottom of the ocean floor and tried to manually close this valve. Unfortunately, the mechanism of the valve was broke and hung up, so it was not possible to even close it manually at that point. So that also failed. Not successful in that, they sent robots down to put a cap over the end of the pipe. And this cap was to go on the pipe. They were running pipes to that cap to pump up to a drill ship. They got the cap on the pipe. It was a successful operation. They started pumping out of it, but unfortunately there's 3 other holes in the pipe, and ultimately it didn't stop any of the oil flow. There's still the same amount flowing out the other holes. On May 6th, crews lowered a 4-story steel box called the containment dome over the largest of the remaining leaks. What their job was to position it over the leak and again attach pipes to it and pump to a drill ship, and this was unsuccessful. A few days later, on May 11th, they constructed a smaller box to lower over that same large leak. They lowered it down, and in the middle of operations they abandoned it because they figured out it was not going to work either. On May 15th, a narrow mile-long pipe was sent down from a drill ship. It was worked into the drill pipe that was leaking. The last 10 feet of that pipe had seals on it to try to seal that pipe up to where they could pump oil up to the drill ship. That has been somewhat successful. They've been able to get some oil pumped out of the pipe that way. On May 26th, crews tried dumping drilling mud into the well pipe to try to put the pressure. Drilling mud has put pressure on top of the oil that's trying to come out. Unfortunately, the drilling mud wasn't heavy enough and the oil kept coming out. So as part of that, on May 27th, they tried to do what they call a jump shot, which engineers decided golf balls and shredded tires would be the best thing to try to pump in there in between the shots of mud to stabilize the mud. This was also unsuccessful. The oil just pushed right past it. On the 29th of May, crews went in and cut the riser pipe that the oil was leaking out of and attempted to place a cap over it, again attaching more pipes to it to pump to drill ships. This is called the Lower Marine Riser Package cap, and it has been somewhat successful, but we still, as you know, have oil still leaking out today. There have also been several efforts to clean up the spill. On April 28th, crews tried to do a controlled burn of the oil, and I mean that's just what it sounds like. They went out and lit the oil off to try to burn it all off the surface before it reaches the coastline. That was pretty successful. Unfortunately, there's so much oil coming out you can't keep up with it burning. You'd have everything on fire. On April 30th, Louisiana National Guard sent all kinds of communications equipment, boats, all-terrain vehicles, and other construction equipment to help in the cleanup of the spill. On May 1st, booms were laid near Chef Monterre and Fort Pike to protect Lake Pontchartrain from the oil spill. On May 3rd, the crews tried to pump chemicals down on top of the leaks. These chemicals are designed to break the oil up and not let it actually make it to the surface. That's been somewhat successful, but again, there's so much leaking out that it's impossible to keep up with all of it. On May 6th, they performed several more of the controlled burns to try to reduce the amount making it to the shoreline. On May 7th, more booms were deployed in other areas of the coastline, and from that day going forward, they have just daily deployed booms and replace booms that are completely oil soaked. They're also using skimmers, which ride along the surface of the water and skim the oil up, separate the oil and water, and put the oil in storage tanks. That has been very successful. Unfortunately, you can't do that unless it's real calm seas, and in the last few weeks, as you know, they've had a lot of storms down in the Gulf region, and they haven't been able to use those ships. There have also been and continue to be many consequences of the oil spill. President Obama has forced BP to create an escrow account to make payments to people that are affected by the oil spill. They have forced them to put billions of dollars in this account to be able to cover those costs. Congress and the Obama administration has suspended $10.5 billion in annual dividends to shareholders of BP and made them set aside as much as $20 million for payments to pay for the cost of the cleanup of the spill. Since the day of the spill and going forward from there, prices of BP shares, stock shares, have just plummeted. President Obama has also said that he is going to force BP to pay for all the damages that have been caused, and that the administration will do any and everything possible to help the people in the region of the Gulf Coast. And President Obama is also calling for a restructure of the offshore drilling agencies that oversee the offshore drilling. Most commercial fishing operations have been halted in the area, and what you probably can figure, commercial fishing is one of the biggest industries in that area, and it's been really affected. Their second biggest industry, tourism, has also been really drastically affected. People have just not going anymore. They're worried about oil on the beach, and it has pretty much shut down their whole travel industry. Both marine life and birds have been dramatically and detrimentally affected by the spill. As you can see, numerous attempts have been made to clean up the spill, and as you can tell, cleanup is going to go on for years past when the spill is fixed. It's not going to be a problem easily fixed. Consequences of this event won't be completely realized for many years to come. This is a very complex situation that won't be easily solved. It will take months or even years for the marine life, for the economy, and for the ecology there to come back to what it should be. There's no doubt this incident will bring about changes in the offshore drilling industry. Again, I thank you for your time and being here tonight. Thanks.